But that's good. That's a reminder that my plans aren't that good to begin with. Well, I am excited to be here today, and I'm excited to see so many faces. I found out this week that it is the lowest church attendance week in the year, and when I asked why, I think I found out the answer today, the daylight savings time change. So I am happy that you're here, and I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen because already we've gone off script, but I can tell you that if you put into practice what we talk about today, I promise you that whatever you were going to gain by staying in bed for another hour, you will receive that back a thousandfold more than sleeping in bed. So we are in the season of Lent, and some of you guys were here on Wednesday where we started our Ash Wednesday service. Lent is the 40 days before Easter, and very briefly, it's supposed to represent the time that Jesus spent in the wilderness before he started his public ministry. And we're starting a new sermon series for Lent, and it's called Treasures Old and New. And it's from a verse in Matthew 13:52, where he says, "Therefore every scribe who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household who brings out of his treasures what is new and what is old." And what that means is during this sermon series, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking back at the Old Testament, and we're going to be finding themes in the Old Testament that Jesus brings out and refreshes for us during his public ministry. And the topic that we'll be talking about today is the marginalized. And I know that Old Testament, reading the Old Testament and understanding the Old Testament is a very difficult subject. Just for curiosity's sake, raise your hand if you've read the entire Old Testament. That was way more hands than I was expecting. And I think that's awesome. But still, for the record, there was a lot of hands that weren't up. And I know from just speaking a few times that a lot of people you're not regularly reading the Bible, period, let alone the Old Testament. And I kind of get it. I've been a lover of the Old Testament since I was a kid. You can ask my dad. He came into my room one time when I was 7. He asked me what I was reading, and I told him Leviticus. And he's like, "What is going on with this kid?" And to be fair, I think I got into the Bible because the Old Testament, when you open it, I just went to page 1 because I was a kid and I didn't know any better. Probably a good thing. When you read the first story in the Bible, it's got my name in it, so I think I kind of was drawn to that, and it stuck with me for some reason. But I love the Old Testament. I know that sounds weird. A lot of you guys are scared. There's things that are happening in the Old Testament that really don't make sense to us today, and if you think about it, that makes sense. These writings were written a long time ago, and many of the stories in the Old Testament existed before not only just like running water and electricity, but even before like paper was around. So you can imagine that when the universe was created in Genesis 1, somebody wasn't taking notes and writing it down and passing that down. These are stories that were collected over many thousands of years, and now we get to read them. And that's awesome, and that should excite us, because many people were either persecuted for passing these writings on, or had to physically spend years of their life writing these words on a really bad piece of paper, like bamboo or papyrus or on an animal skin. You can imagine that is not easy. It's not like typing on a keyboard and hitting print, or even with a pencil and paper. So these words are meaningful. They mean something. And I can't tell you that today in the 15 minutes or so that I'm going to be up here that I'm going to be able to explain it all to you, and that I'm going to be able to tell you that it all makes sense, because it doesn't. Anyone tells you they can read the Old Testament and make sense of everything in it is lying to you. Don't believe them. But I do encourage you to read it for yourself and struggle and wrestle with some of the concepts that are in it, because it's important for us to understand who this God is that we claim to follow, and we claim to worship and want to be disciples of. Because there is messages and there are themes in the Old Testament that are very applicable to your life today. They are extremely important to us, and if we call ourselves Christians, we need to understand what those are. I don't expect that after you guys go home that you're going to crack open your Bible, start at page 1, and start being voracious readers of the Old Testament. I hope that's the case. But I'm trying to be a little bit more realistic today. So I'm going to give you the Adam's version of the TLDR of the Old Testament. Does everyone know what TLDR is? Raise your hand if you do know what TLDR is. I'm looking for the youth out here. I can't see too well. Chaz, what's TLDR? Too long, didn't read. So if you're on the internet and you see TLDR, it's like, hey, this post is too long, I'm not reading it. Let's jump to the comments and see what someone says about it. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to jump to the comments of the Old Testament, and I'm going to tell you, as someone who's read it multiple times, there are themes in this book, or themes in these writings that you will see over and over and over again, and you almost have to work to climb around them and get at other stuff, because they keep hitting you in the face over and over as you read. And we're going to talk about some of those things today. We're going to start with our verse of the day. Alan's going to come up and read it. And it's from the book of Isaiah. And we'll talk about why this verse is so important in a moment. But just as a little bit of background, Isaiah was a prophet. He was a messenger for God. And he was speaking in this verse to the Israelites. At this time, they had been kicked out of their homeland and were under Babylonian rule. And they were like, hey, when are we going to get back to our homes? When are we going to be able to get back to being this chosen people of God? Instead, we're stuck in this foreign land and being oppressed, and we're really not viewed very favorably.
Isaiah chapter 61, verses 1 to 2. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, for the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted and to proclaim that captives will be released and prisoners will be freed. He has sent me to tell those who mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come.
Thank you, Alan. When we speak today about who the character of God is and how we can see that throughout the Old Testament, you're going to see these themes pop up over and over again. And lest that you think that this is a obscure passage in the Old Testament, I'm going to provide a couple examples. There are dozens of examples of this kind of language that we're going to see in the Old Testament. This one is particularly important, and the reason why it's important is because when Jesus did his kind of inaugural home speech, home address, he was baptized, he went into the wilderness for 40 days, that's that timing of Lent that we talked about. And when he was done, he went back home, and he went to his home church. And the first message that he gave to his home church, or synagogue, he had the opportunity to read from the Old Testament. And this is what he did. He went to the scroll of Isaiah, he opened it, and he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come." This is Jesus' opening words to people to let him know, hey, God's here on this planet. He's in me, and this is what he wants to tell you. I have good news for you if you're poor. He didn't come down and give good news to kings and rulers and people in power. He didn't come down to say, hey, if your storeroom is full and you got enough food to last for the next 10 years, I've got good news for you. Hey, if everything's going right in your life and you're just having an awesome time, I have good news for you. He didn't say, if you haven't experienced any discomfort or if you're in a place of peace, I have good news for you. He's specifically addressing in his first message to his people who he's here for. And he's here to help people that are hurting. He's here to help people that aren't having a good go of it, that are having a difficult time, that are experiencing pain, they're mourning, they're in discomfort, they're in prison, they're held captive, they're being oppressed, they're poor. These are the people that God looks after, and he wanted us to know that when he gave that speech. We're going to look back at some other passages, just a sprinkling, like I said, of some Old Testament passages, and then I'm going to show you how they relate to things that Jesus is saying later on. And I really hope that you just kind of pay attention to who these messages are addressed to and what kind of state of mind that they might be in when they hear these words. Because I think it's important to understand the character of God, of who he addresses these messages to, and why that's so important. The first thing I'd like to talk about is in Leviticus 19. And Leviticus is really just a book of rules that God had set up for the Israelite nation. They were wandering in the desert, and they didn't really have a permanent homeland yet. So God gave them some instructions about how to live and how to set up their community to be a godly community, a community that was set apart from other places around them. And this is what he says in Leviticus 19. When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your fields, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. It is the same with your grape crop. Do not strip every last bunch of grapes from the vines, and do not pick up the grapes that fall to the ground. Leave them for the poor and the foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God. So this passage, it's a little bit weird for us as 21st century Americans. This thing that they're talking about is called gleaning, and what it is when you were farming your crops, you wouldn't, you go through and you pick all the grapes off the vine, and then you move on to the next vine, you pick all the grapes up. Well, they had a practice called gleaning where you only could go through one time. So if you missed a grape on your first pass, leave it, go on to the next one. And on all the outsides of your farmland, don't pick the stuff that's on the outside. That would probably confuse farmers of the day. Why am you telling me to grow all this stuff and then I can't pick my own crop? Well, it's because they had a practice where if you didn't have a job, or you were a foreigner coming to the land and you didn't know where to go for food, or you didn't know what to do, you could walk up to any field and you could pick fruit or grain from the edges of the field and you could eat it, and that would give you a sense of job. So what God was doing here is essentially establishing some sort of social safety net, right? That we're not going to extract every little bit of resources out of everything that we have at the expense of people who don't have anything, right? And although I would venture to say 99 or 100% of the people in this room aren't making a living from harvesting crops today, you do have a harvest, right? There is a source of harvest for you in your life. For most of us, it looks like a paycheck from a company or a business that you own. And you can think about this in a way that makes more sense to you personally, but apply the same concept. Don't maximize every last resource that you personally have for your own personal benefit. Let's make sure that we leave the edges of some of the stuff that we get for the people that don't have. And I think in a lot of modern day contexts, they would talk about tithing to a ministry, a church, whatever. But it's important that we remember that there are people that don't have. There are people in this land, and in Ballantyne, in this zip code, that are hungry. And we need to make sure that we're saving some of our resources to give to those who don't have jobs, or to foreigners who are here and they're confused and they're lonely and they don't know what to do. We can establish a portion of our resources to make sure that they feel comfortable, to make sure that they understand that there's a God who's looking for them and taking care of them. And I'm glad that we're already doing some of that work here at this church. Going to look at another passage from Psalm 146. I think we all know the Psalms. These are songs that people wrote to God. We don't know who the author of this one is, but I think he did a pretty good job of letting us know about God's character. He gives justice to the oppressed and food to the hungry. The Lord frees the prisoners. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are weighed down. The Lord loves the godly. The Lord protects the foreigner among us. He cares for the orphans and widows. So we go through this list and you start looking at who he's talking about, who is the target of God's love, and what is God putting his attention and time to. He's putting his attention to those that are oppressed, those who are hungry, those who are in prison, those who are blind. You can imagine being blind back in that day was very difficult. Always difficult if you can't see, but and especially in a world without technology or service dogs, you are really relying on other people. That didn't always go well. Those who are weighed down, people who are anxious and not at peace. Foreigners, people that aren't from that land, that are there for whatever reason, and they don't understand the culture, they don't have ties, they need community in order to fit in. Orphans and widows, so children without parents that don't have anyone to advocate for them, or widows who don't have anyone to look after them and need other community to take care of them. These are the people that he loves, and these are the people that, as you read these stories in the Old Testament, you're going to see over and over again, God is calling us to look out for them. He's creating rules for us. He's creating, he's giving us direct instruction on how we need to treat people that are in these positions. We're going to go to Isaiah 58. And again, Isaiah, the prophet who was prophesying to Israel as they were removed from their homeland. And I'm going to try to make this brief, give you a little summary of context here, but what he says in this chapter is that the people of Israel they're upset because they're being kicked out of their homeland, and they're saying, hey, God, we're coming to the temple and we're fasting, and please, you should answer us because we're fasting and we're being humble, and we need your help. And God has some choice words for them. They're not exactly pleasant. He's not saying, great job, guys, I'm going to start hearing you now that you're fasting. He actually calls them out for some of their bad behavior. And then he says, this is the kind of fasting that I want. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free. And remove chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry. And give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them. And do not hide from relatives who need your help. So that's a pretty clear response from God about what he's asking from us. He's not asking for us to come to church. He's not asking for us to sing worship songs just for the sake of singing the songs. What he wants from us is action. What he wants for us is to care about people who are not having a good time here on earth. Care about people who are in mourning. Care about people who do not have food to eat or clothes to wear or a home to live in. These are the people that we need to look after and care for. It's not just the hearing and understanding of what God is telling us that really matters. We've all probably in some degree or fashion heard these words, maybe not like in this exact context, but we all know that we should be feeding the hungry, right? I don't think that's a surprise for anybody that God has called us to feed people that are hungry or to give shelter to those that are homeless. We've heard these things before. We're not blessed and we're not doing God's will by just hearing that. God gives us very clear instructions through Jesus when he shows up, and he repeats these lines over and over again that we need to be loving people, that we need to be reaching out to people and putting action to this. And Jesus gives us the TLDR on the whole Old Testament. He kind of reframes it in very short order. He takes all these 617 rules and laws that the Jews of the day were trying to follow, and he cuts it down to 2. He says, love God, love your neighbor, you're good. He tells a story in Matthew 25:34, and this story is really long, so I'm going to paraphrase it. But he's talking about what's going to happen at the end of time, right? Like when this world passes, what's God going to do? And he says he's going to separate people into 2 groups, okay? He's going to separate them into 2 groups. Into the group that he calls his people, the ones that say, hey, you're going to get to heaven. You're going to be in the kingdom with us. This is the kingdom that we prepared for you before the world was created. He has this to say to those people. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, to inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me to your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. And I was in prison and you visited me. And God's chosen people take a look at that, and they're like, what are you talking about? When did you show up, Jesus, and I gave you a drink? Has anyone given a drink to Jesus here? Or given food to Jesus? I think you have. And he tells us why right here. He said, I tell you the truth, when you did it to the least one of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. God is so wrapped up in the plight of the marginalized, and the plight of people who are not having a good time. He takes it so personally that however you treat someone that's poor, or that needs shelter, or that's in prison, or that's sick in the hospital, however you're treating these people, he looks at it as how you're treating him. So if you've ignored somebody that said, hey, I need food today, it's like God came up to you and said, hey, you got anything for me? And you said, no. That is scary, right? But it's also beautiful because it tells us that God is a person he's somebody that just cares about people, and he wants us to do the same thing. He's looking for us to go out and be the kind of people that are responding in the way he's asking us to. He's looking for us to do all these things, to feed the hungry, to give drinks to the thirsty, to welcome the stranger into our homes, to give clothes to those who need it, to care for the sick and those that are in prison. He's asking us to do these things. I've been fortunate in the last couple of years to meet some really incredible people that are following these rules. They've set up their life in order to help the marginalized. And I get excited every time I see it because these are the happiest people I know. They really are. It seems like a quick jump to some of the work I do at the prison ministry with Kairos. I've been going to prison every week for about a year now. And some of the greatest Christians I know, because they are in absolutely terrible circumstances, and yet they have true joy, a joy that I don't know a lot of people that have that kind of joy in their life, except for maybe the people that go down and visit with them. These are people that are in terrible circumstances, and yet they're loving life. And why is that? Because they're following these commands. They're praying for others. They're not letting their circumstance blind them to what's really meaningful in this life, and that's following God's rules, following God's laws. He's not setting this stuff up to punish us or to make our lives miserable. He's doing it because he knows that's the best way for us to live. And just like we tell our children to eat their vegetables, right? We know they're not necessarily going to enjoy the vegetables, but we know that's the thing that's going to bring them the most amount of health in their life. And I believe these rules are these commands are the same way. He wants us to be whole. And this is how we do it. I mentioned getting excited about working with people or meeting people that are taking these commands to heart. And I'm very excited to announce my friend Cal, if you want to come on up. Cal Gonda is a friend of mine. I've known him for about 20 years now. I met him at work. Very thankful for him setting off my career. But even more importantly, a few years ago, I was reading the Charlotte Observer, and I saw that they were doing a write-up on Cal. And it was for an art studio that he had created in Charlotte to help some of his friends in Zimbabwe. It's called the Real African Art Gallery. And I hope you give him a warm welcome. I'm excited to hear what he has to say. Thanks, bud. Let me give you this one. There you go.
Hello, everyone. I thought Adam and I were connected with our passion for logistics from meeting 20 years ago. Little did I know that our passion for helping others today will be 10 times stronger. As Adam mentioned, we met about 20 years ago working together at Continental Logistics Department. Little did I know my life would change to be as great as it is today on a personal level. But let's go back a few steps. I am born and raised in Zimbabwe. I came to this country 26 years ago to attend university, UNC Pembroke to be specific. Upon graduation, life happened, got a job, things worked out just the way that I dreamt them to be, even way above that. However, where I'm from, where I'm born, where I'm raised, as my own personal life, my career, all the things I ever dreamt about were manifesting before my own eyes, the opposite was happening to my people. More precisely, Zimbabwe went through some very challenging political times, economic times. Still today, same thing is happening. Fast forward about 6-7 years ago, I'm going home every so often, and as I mentioned, things are getting worse and worse. I began to think of things I can do to also try and support my community. My mother, who's now late, was my conduit. Send her some resources. She raised a couple orphans, give the church, and slowly and surely things are working out. Well, God had a different plan. God said to me, we need her in heaven. Her time on earth is done. While it was painful for me to go through the experience, I began to understand the impact of what she was doing for the community. Out of a sense of responsibility, I began a few initiatives, give to the youth, give to the widows as part of the church, small projects, but I also knew that was probably not going to be enough. I then thought about this art gallery thing. I'm like, well, if we put these people to work, these won't be handouts. That means every day, as much as they can, they use their hands, they make these paintings, they make this art. If we bring it to America, this could be something that goes on and on. Today, as you and I speak, we own a 2,000 square foot gallery in university area. We have 72 stone sculptors in that gallery. We have 3 main painters. In about 4 years and 2 months, I have never, in a single day on earth, taken a single penny out of that venture. I have poured my hard-earned savings, including the little 401k that I had at that point in time. But what's very, very important is as I go back home, I was just home first 2 weeks of this year. I'll be back home again end of April. As I see these people's lives change, and it's not monumental change, it's their ability to now finish a home they started, take their parents for that operation that they wanted to do, send their kids to school. As I reflect upon my own life, I realize I am nothing. God gave me to give. Today, in my full-time responsibility, I'm still at Continental. It's 20 plus years later. I'm one of the executives, running one of their business units. I wish I could tell you that I'm that good and I am that deserving, but I'm not. What simply happened is God has given me to give. I have been extremely, extremely fortunate to the point where I describe my life in 2 very simple words. It's grace and it's mercy. If you knew where I came from, if you know what I went through, and you know where I am today, then you would understand and you would believe. I was once a goat herder. Daddy's in prison. Mom goes back to her family. You get sent to the rural areas with your grandparents. You go pick up cotton. You go to school. You take the goats. You come back. There is no way, if you tell me with that background, with where I am today, that I would tell you that I deserve it. And that is the number one reason between today and the day he calls me home. My mission, personally, is to lift as many people out of poverty that I can. I was born there. I was raised there. Every year I go there 2-3 times. And if I see a child, for $3, if you knew per day what it does for a child, $3 American, I didn't say 30. I have 2 kids, by the way, 20 and 14. We go out to eat, the 3 of us. We are breaking $100 easily. And that's nothing fancy. You know that. I know that. But for $100, $3 per day, if you saw what we're doing for these kids, they're going to go to school, they have food. It's about the best feeling life can ever give you. Thank you for your attention. If you ever get a chance to come to the university area, I kindly invite you to come take a look at our gallery. As I mentioned, the entire mission is about improving other people's lives, and I would really, really appreciate it. Outside, we have a little setup that'll give you a taste of what we have in the gallery. And one more time, Real African Art Gallery. I thank you for your attention. And Adam, thank you for the invitation. God bless you guys.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. Well, I think we're all blessed for being able to meet Cal today. And I really encourage you after the service, he's going to be hanging out by the gallery just to get a small taste of what's up at the gallery. My wife and I love going to art galleries, and I can tell you, his is one of the best I've ever seen. I mean, it's just very well laid out. All the prices are reasonable, and the cause is top notch. You heard it straight from Cal's mouth. I highly recommend you to check out outside. Go up to the store in University. It's a little bit of a drive, but it's well worth it. And start looking for ways. I mean, we're not just talking about Cal's store here, but there are so many ways for us to get involved here at this church. We do child sponsorship drives for the ones in Haiti. We're constantly doing outside mission work. There's causes like Cal's Gallery that pop up and they're surrounding us all the time. Start taking that practice of gleaning in our personal lives. Let's leave some of our resources that we're very blessed to live here and to be able to know that we know where our next meal is coming from and have a roof over our heads and be able to go to work and provide for our families. There are a lot of people in this world that can't say the same thing. And it's important for us to remember that and do our best to take a little bit of the resources that we have and give back to people that are really needing it. And I promise you, you will be blessed in a way that you can't even imagine. I promise you. After a couple minutes after the close of service, we're going to come back in here and do a Q&A with Cal. 5 minutes was not a long enough time to hear his story and hear about the great work that he's doing. So I highly encourage you to come back afterwards, bring your kids, ask a lot of questions, and be blessed by that. So I'm going to pray for us real quick. God, we thank you for your word. We thank you that you are so worthy of our praise, that you're someone that cares about all of us and especially those that are hurting. We thank you that you have allowed us to be a part of your plan to bring reconciliation to this world. You are looking for us to be the agents of change in this world, and I ask for your spirit to come upon this church and the people that are here and the people that are listening to this message right now, wherever they are, that you give us your spirit so that we can go out and give selflessly and be a part of the solution. And I thank you for choosing us even though we are not worthy. Amen. All right, so as the band is singing, feel free. We've got offering boxes on the corner if you want to drop your offering. We also have our prayer room that's open, and Denise is going to be our prayer partner today. So if you have any prayer requests, you can go back and meet her. And because I have the microphone, I am going to advocate for our prayer team. A lot of times we're back there, and we're just hoping someone comes back. So don't feel shy. I think every single person that's on the prayer team would enjoy it if there was like a long line to get back there. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, but don't be shy about asking for prayer. Thank you.